What's up, everybody, and welcome back to The Hum, a Kansas Hoops podcast via the Field of 68. We have an action-packed episode today. We'll be going over Kansas's 19-point win over Arizona State, and then we'll preview Cincinnati with one of their beat writers. Of course, Kansas playing Cincinnati on Saturday. So without further ado, let's do this. Episode 56 of The Hum coming right up next. All right, Jackson. Kansas beats Arizona State 74-55 inside Allen Fieldhouse. Bill Self now finally has a win over Bobby Hurley. He was previously 0-2 versus Bobby, and the Jayhawks are now tied 6-6 with Arizona State in the all-time series. That first half, you're kind of watching it. You're like, oh man, is this a repeat of the West Virginia game? But then Kansas limited Arizona State to 13 points in the second half. 13, Jackson, the lowest points Kansas has allowed in a half since 2013 versus TCU. And then the rest was history. Dominant win for Kansas again, two in a row now for the Jayhawks. Bez, what are just your thoughts with this effort from Kansas?
Well, I couldn't watch the first half live because I had practice. And of course, I get in the car, check the score immediately, and I'm like, oh my gosh. I see the halftime score. I'm like, not again. There is no way. And then that was the Kansas team in the second half, this Kansas team we talked about in October and in November. That's what we finally saw. The defensive metrics that have been so positive towards Kansas that I've personally been a little skeptical about because I just haven't seen it. I'm like, get a few stops here and there, but this isn't like a top five defensive team in the country. That second half might have changed my mind there. That was 13 points and a half. That's freaking crazy. Like, imagine turning on a score to start a second half and one team has 13 points. Like, that's pretty wild that Kansas was able to do that. And, Arizona State weirdly has Kansas's number. I don't know what the Bobby Hurley Bill Self thing is very strange. Shout out Remy Martin coming in as a sophomore, as a Sun Devil, beating Kansas in the non-con in Allen Fieldhouse way back when. But yeah, finally, some dominance shown by Kansas. And UCF, like that game turned into a pickup game with like 15 minutes left. This
Yeah.
was an actual, like, this was Kansas dominating for 20 straight minutes, coming out of the second half and forcing Hurley to call a timeout even before the under 16-minute mark. That was really impressive.
To me, we can't talk about this game, Bez, without talking about Shakeel Moore.
Mhm.
I'm gonna make quite the statement, but my outlook on Kansas basketball this season has completely changed with the emergence of Shakeel Moore these past two games. You look at the numbers, and they don't necessarily jump out. He had 8 points, one rebound, one assist, two steals, zero turnovers, but he was plus 25 in 22 minutes. And those two steals both came at times where Kansas was still trying to go on a run to kind of get out of this hole. I believe the second steal of his made it 49 to 42, if I'm not mistaken, or somewhere around there. So those two plays were absolutely huge for the momentum in this game for Kansas to end up finishing out the way they did. And Shaquille Moore, he just brings so much energy, defensive effort, and you can just hear whenever he speaks in the press conference, like how much of a leader he is, how much he understands what's going on. The season, in my eyes, has changed a little bit here with Shaquille Moore playing like this.
Yeah, totally. And I think people forgot that when he transferred to Kansas, that was a pretty big get. Like he's a legit SEC guard, can guard a lot of different types of athletes. He can guard ball handlers, he can guard shooters. He's very versatile on the defensive end. And if he's going to give you 8 points, that's kind of a lot for Shaquille Moore. Like, Kansas will absolutely take 8 points from him. And you make a great point, Sam, like you said, the actual numbers themselves aren't mind-boggling, but it's how he did it and when he did it.
Yep.
It was just very timely, situational stuff. And, I think he's leaning towards the side of, Bill Self trusts him. He trusts him out there in big, crucial minutes. And, like we talked about last episode, it'll be really interesting to see what Bill does with the starting lineup if Shaq is just there now, which I don't think you're going to find many people
I think he
complaining
earned
about
it.
because he's busting his butt.
I think he earned it, Bez. I think he earned
Right.
the starting spot. To me, Yeah, we've talked about kind of the leadership thing a little bit on the podcast whenever Kansas, is struggling. Uh, and if you think about it, like Kansas doesn't have like a big vocal guy, like just absolute energy presence. I mean, like DeJuan, he's not a big energy vocal guy. I mean, KJ, he tries to be that, energy on the court guy, but he's not necessarily a vocal leader. Hunter, we know he's not really that guy. It has to come from somewhere. And I think that somewhere now is Shakeel Moore. I mean, the way he carries himself on the court, the energy he plays with, just the way he talks. I'm really excited for Shakeel Moore going forward here.
Yeah, and he looks like he's having fun.
Oh yeah.
When Kansas was in that little lull, it did not look fun. It looked miserable. You've got AJ and Rylan with some brutal body language, and like you said, Dewan and Hunt, they're not going to rally the locker room, give a big speech at halftime. Maybe they will at some point, but that's not really their MO necessarily. And just to have Shaq, you touch on the leadership part, just have enjoy playing basketball, man. Like sometimes that's what you need. Sometimes you need a kid that comes in and is just happy to be there, happy to be on the court, loves playing basketball, tries hard. I mean, that, like you said, that can change the mentality of an entire team. When you have one guy who just comes in, bunch of joy, bunch of energy, that is super contagious for the rest of the team. Especially like, it's not like the guys hate basketball. Absolutely not. You think AJ Storr enjoys being miserable right now? No, he does not. But Shaq coming in is like, oh yeah, this is supposed to be fun. We're Kansas basketball. We're at home. We should win every game at home by 20 against unless it's a top ranked opponent. Like that just should be how it is.
Yeah, I thought it was funny. Basically, Shaquille Moore said he overheard somebody in the locker room being like, we're not losing at home. And then Shaquille is like, yeah, you know what? I'm gonna go out there. I'm gonna play with some passion. I'm gonna get some stops, and we're gonna win this game. The self quote from after that one, he said, "To me, if I was gonna pick an MVP of the game, I'd pick Shaq Moore just because of the energy he brought. He didn't score a ton of points, but he makes plays that, to me, give the team confidence and spark energy as much as anything." He said those two steals, I thought they were huge plays. So, uh, Rylan Griffin, Bez, I also thought played really well in this game
I agree.
and played with a ton of energy as well. He was on the receiving end of a Shaq Moore assist after one of his steals. And this is the thing. Shaquille Moore and Rylan Griffin were arguably the two best players in the game for Kansas. They combined for 17 points, Jackson.
Hmm.
17 points. So, kind of all of that just to say, when the stats start actually piling up for these two dudes a little bit more, man, look out because Kansas, they're going to be pretty dangerous. And I also thought it was pretty funny that Bill Self said after the UCF game, like, if Rylan Griffin were to go 1 of 4 from three, he would be just as impactful in that game. Well, against Arizona State, Rylan Griffin went 1 of 4 from three and was pretty dang impactful.
I thought that was Ryland's best game, to be quite honest. And, talking with people around the office, obviously a bunch of basketball nuts. They watch every KU game because they're hate watching Iowa State fans, and that's what they do. And it's come to a point that Ryland's figured out his role, right? When you have a guy like Hunter Dickinson, you can have two guys combined for 17 points and feel like they were super impactful because a guy like Hunter and even Zeke at this point is getting into this territory. They're going to provide offense. It's just almost a given, especially with a guy like Hunter Dickinson. Ryland was all over the place, man. Even in the second half, even down the stretch when the game was in hand, Kansas up 20. He's the first one going for balls out of bounds, trying to save him. He's getting on the floor. He's getting his hands in passing lanes. He has found his role. He knows that he's not going to be the guy. He was not the guy at Alabama. I don't think he thought he was going to be the guy coming in. Maybe he thought he was going to get more shots, but he has found out like, hey, there's certain things I can do to stay on the floor. And any basketball player will tell you just staying on the floor is more important than being the guy, especially at a place like Kansas where it's kind of tough to. There's been a lot of really good guys to come through Kansas, so that's a lot to live up to. So just find your role. If you're open, shoot that thing, Rylan, stripe it. But on defense, we need your effort. We need your intensity, your length. He's so long, Sam. He could be such a great defender out on the wing just because of his build. And it's really good to see him figure that out when, like I still think this team's ceiling is only as high as AJ Storr can take them, and that's a really scary thing to say right now. But it's nice to see Rylan come in and be like, okay, I'll give you 10.
He's
I'll go
bought in.
5 from 3. He bought in 100%. He just completely bought in, and I hope that stays the same way going forward.
Well, Jackson, since you brought him up, we got to talk about him. AJ Storr. This game, AJ Storr plays 3 minutes. He was -7 in those 3 minutes. The only Jayhawk that was minus in the plus minus category. And again, -7 in 3 minutes. Pretty hard to do whenever your team wins by 19. Basically, this was AJ Storr's night. He checked in. The first thing he does whenever he checks in is turns the ball over, throws it
Not
away. Uh,
Not good.
and Arizona State, I don't even know if I don't think. Yeah, they did. They scored right away on that because that was in the first half. Then uh, going down the court, I think he ends up turning it over. A couple possessions later, he kind of stumbles driving to the basket, turns it over. He had a failed defensive assignment. I don't know if you remember the play where Hunter was closing out to the corner. That was on AJ. He shouldn't have been doing that. And then he fouled trying to grab a rebound. -7, 3 minutes. And if you think about it, like that's what changed the first half. Like right
Mhm.
there is
Yeah.
the moment that it was like, okay, this Arizona State just went on the run, and Kansas walks in, down 6 at halftime, and it's mostly because of AJ Storr.
I laugh because I've had I've had a moment like that where you're kind of in the doghouse and you're busting your butt trying to get on the floor and it's just not clicking. You get in and just everything that could possibly go wrong goes wrong. If that was not an indictment of like how little confidence he has right now, I mean, I don't know what else you can even say. Like he is just confidence zero right now and it sucks. And like you can't even like I think Bill needs to play him more, but that's a bad argument to make after that game because he was so brutal in the such little amount of time he was in. I can't make the argument that he should have played more in that game because he absolutely should not have. So it's just -7 in 3 minutes when your team wins by 20. I mean, that's not good, Sam. That's just really not good. I am concerned. It's, I don't think Kansas was ever going to lose that game last against Arizona State. I didn't think they would win by 20 after the first half, but like I said earlier, man, if AJ's done, if this is just it, I think that caps the ceiling a little bit
It
because
does.
he's such a game changer. But right now he's being a game changer in a very negative way, and I'm just pulling for him. I want him to get out of this, but time's running out, Sam. That's what Goodman was
Time's
saying on
running
the pod
out,
the other day.
and
Time is running out.
the rotation right now, Bez, is like taking form, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not
Mm-hmm.
including AJ Storr. This is what Bill Self said after the game here. Basically, he first kind of said that AJ hasn't plugged himself into the rotation yet. We'll kind of talk about that rotation later. But then I asked a follow-up, just, what he needs to show to stay on the floor. This is the Bill Self quote. He said, "You saw the game. He had a rough 3 minutes, -7 in 3 minutes. So yeah, he probably got about what he deserved tonight. So what he needs to do to stay on the floor is play to an energy level that it doesn't take away from other people's abilities when he's out there. And sometimes the ball sticks a little bit, but he's a good player. He just hasn't quite figured it out yet." It's almost to me like there's just no want to for AJ Storr right now. Bez, like he's just, yeah, it's the complete opposite of Shakeel Moore, right? He's not playing with passion. He's not playing with energy. And I hate to say it, that might just kind of be AJ Storr as a guy, you know? Like he's not an overly just like, bubbly type of guy. He's more of a laid back guy. I don't know if that's it, but it's really getting to the danger zone, to the point where like AJ Storr might just be cooked, like you said, like he actually might just be cooked.
when you're playing to not mess up, you end up playing worse.
Oh yes.
And it's like when we're at practice, we're doing these layup drills, and it's like I'm like, all right, we gotta make 10 in a row. I will watch the girls literally start to slow up, slower and slower every time because they're so I have to make this. We have to get 10 in a row. Just go. Go in and go score. Go as fast as you can. You are way more likely to actually score if you're just going. And AJ's coming in and he's trying to fit into this rotation, but at the same time, he's still kind of trying to be the guy while also self's in his ear the whole time. So defensively, he's not super locked in because he's so focused on his guy. He's like, I can, if I get scored on, I'm coming out. So I'm just going to lock in here. And then you get lost defensively on help side. Offensively, well, I want to move the ball and I don't want to turn it over because I'll come out if I turn it over, but I'll also come out if I'm not being aggressive and not scoring. It's just that's such a dangerous spot to be in for him. And it's all mentality, I think, like you said. And, like maybe he does want to. Maybe he's playing with a bunch of passion and practice that we don't see. But what we're seeing in the games right now is a guy who I don't think is checked out by any means, but just lost. And like he's playing to not mess up. And that just is not going to work.
This is the Nick Schwerdt tweet that I thought was pretty hilarious during the game. Nick tweeted, "I guess Shaq Moore is proof you don't need to get consistent playing time in order to not suck."
Yeah.
AJ can still prove in what will probably be limited time that he does not suck, but he just hasn't. And for all the fans out there, he's like, give him more time, give him more time.
Why?
That why? Yeah, like literally, why?
I was just there.
This is a stat from Rock Chalk Blog. In the West Virginia and Arizona State games, Kansas is minus 22 with AJ Storr on the floor and plus 40 with him off the floor.
That's a
That's it
pretty
all.
big discrepancy.
You think
That's
so,
not.
Bez?
Yeah, I do think so. Yeah, I do think that's a pretty wide margin. It's like I was just in that camp, guys. I was just in the get AJ the ball, get him playing time, get him comfortable. At some point, it's not Bill Self's job to get AJ comfortable. At some point, it falls solely on the player to figure it out and get things going. And if you're taking too long, I already have 8 guys that have figured it out by now. And if you're not one of those 8, the preseason stuff, the money we gave you, the leaderboards you're on, the mock drafts you were on, that is all gone and all out the window. It's mid-January. You got 2 games per week until the season's over, this point going forward.
Sometimes
There
three.
is sometimes 3. There is not enough time for you to figure your stuff out. You had that. Now, I'm not counting him out because I think AJ Storr is a stud basketball player. But right now, he is not in the rotation. And if you told me that in October, I'd be like, did he tear his ACL? There's no way I thought that. But we're watching it happen. And for the people who are still like, we got to get him more minutes, got to get him more touches. Look, man,
You're
at
not
some
watching.
point,
You're not
at,
watching.
at some point, it's just not clicking. It happens. And I've tried so hard to rack my brain because I love comparing the team we're talking about to previous teams to give some context of like, this is kind of what's going on now, what we used to watch 5, 6 years ago. I don't have one for AJ, man. I just don't. Like it's such a bizarre
Maybe
situation.
Quentin Grimes ish.
But even then, like AJ's just balled out in Big Ten play. Quentin Grimes, 5-star or whatever,
Yeah.
just didn't work out, goes to Houston, plays well. AJ is like already played well at a high level. And he's now just, I mean, that he is a shell of that kid. And it sucks, but look, man, it's the winning business. We are in the winning business, and you are not contributing to winning right now. Those plus minus numbers speak for themselves.
Yeah, he's the ninth man right now. The rotation uh, right now is shaping up to be this. I mean, the starters are looking a lot like it's going to continue to be DeJuan, Zeke Mayo, Shakeel Moore in that third starting spot, and then KJ and Hunter Dickinson. Whether you like it or not, Bill Self is pretty committed to playing two bigs this season. I mean, when have we not seen two
Right,
bigs on the
right.
floor? And those are going to rotate through the three, KJ, Hunt, and Flory for the two spots. You got Dewan then, and then of course Shaquille and Rylan are kind of like the wing spot, and then you got Diggy to spell either Dewan or Zeke Mayo. Like AJ is the odd man out right now. There is not a spot that he has created for himself right now. So the overall point, though, that I kind of wanted to make, and Self even said this after the game, it's almost impossible to bat 1,000 in the portal, right?
Yeah.
Like it is almost impossible. We saw it with Nick Timberlake last season, and by the way, somebody pointed out in the Discord that Zeke Mayo already has one more three-pointer and 28 more points than Timberlake had all of last season, which is absolutely hilarious. But uh, you got Zeke Mayo, that's a hit. Shakeel Moore right now is looking like a hit. Or for what Diggy's role is and what he brings, and probably what he was expected to bring, that's a hit. And Rylan Griffin's coming around, so that's a hit. You can't hit on all five, right?
No,
Like you just can't. And AJ
it's
scores the one that, oddly enough, was probably the highest touted and is now the one in the doghouse.
I mean, how often do you ever bat 1,000 on freshmen too? You know, it just doesn't happen. One guy is going to get left behind. And like, if you would ask me before this year, I would have been like, I mean, Diggy, I don't know if he'll play more than 10 minutes a game. You know, it might not. Dude, this whole situation is going. I'm going to look back in 5 years and still be confused on what the heck happened. And then
Unless
the
he turns it
Timberlake,
around. Unless he just goes,
unless
unless he
he
pulls
turns
a Remy
around.
Martin and he's just going nuclear in March for no reason.
Which even that situation's like, I can't compare that because there was stuff going on behind the scenes. He had a legit injury that was being played with by a lot of different people, including himself. It was a whole different ballgame. And he already like his career achievements at Arizona State that he had gotten to, he was one of the best, you know, most heralded, most accomplished point guards in the country. So you kind of knew he was going to turn it on at some point. AJ is like, man, and even when Remy was in, there was never a confidence issue with that kid. Like that was the last part of the thing we were worried about with Remy. Dude, I just don't see it. The Zeke Timberlake stuff is freaking hilarious. I mean, how did Kansas win any games last year? Timberlake
Uh,
started a ton of games.
I don't know. I have no
What?
idea. Last year
Weird.
was a fever dream, to
It
be
really was,
honest.
dude.
I wanted to talk kind of identity a little bit to get us out of here, Bez. Players kind of finding their roles. I think this team really is starting to figure it out. Like it's written on the walls right now. Zeke Mayo and Hunter Dickinson are your go-to guys offensively. They've established themselves so that you can rely on those two at this for the rest of the season, probably for 15 plus points per game. Those are the alpha dogs offensively for Kansas. You got Dewan, Shakeel Moore, KJ just playing their asses off defensively. They're kind of heading that, top four defense for Kansas. Then you got Rylan, who I think is really bought into the off the bench role. You're there to make shots and provide energy. Flory does what he does. Diggy is Diggy. It's literally just AJ right now that has yet to find what is going on. And this is Self on the rotation. He said, quote, AJ hasn't plugged himself into that yet, but I actually think so. Like he thinks the rotation's coming together. He said, we thought all along AJ would be KJ's backup, but if you do that, then Flory doesn't play enough, and we need Flory out there making some of the athletic plays that he can make. But I'm feeling more comfortable with it, the rotation, and Diggy. He just hasn't made some shots lately, but I think there's still room for improvement. So the rotation, it's coming together. It's coming together.
He's lying. They did not think AJ would be KJ's backup. That's a bunch of crap. I do not believe that for 1 second. That is a total backtrack. I'm on to you, Bill. I'm on to you. That is not true. But he is correct. Where like, look, man, like I said earlier, there's not enough time left. There's just not. You've got your eight. Bill likes to have seven, honestly.
Yeah.
So trying to play with the ninth man and he's not confident in what he's doing and trying to shoehorn him in and kind of baby him and coddle him. You got it, AJ. You can do it, bud. Like, go. No, man. Like this Big 12 play, dude. We got too much going on, and I already got guys that are bought in, know their role, and it's clearly working. That was a beautiful display of basketball in the second half. Beautiful. And AJ was not a part of it. So,
Nope.
going forward, is he going to play 0 minutes? I don't think so, because there's always going to be foul trouble. If Ryland's 1 for 8 or if Zeke's 1 for 9 and they're out of whack, AJ's going to have to provide something. But just a simple rotation, man, I think he's right. I don't think AJ's in it. And that's weird, but that's just the fact of the matter right now.
Yeah, I think the identity of this team is really turning into a team that can guard, and AJ Store isn't necessarily one who, you know, contributes to
Not
that
locked down.
identity exactly. But yeah, with Shaq now, uh, I really think that Kansas is going to lean into that, make people play bad mentality. That the team that got the tournament canceled due to COVID that everybody thought was so good. I mean, that's exactly what they did, night in, night out. And honestly, it's almost insane that you have Hunter Dickinson going out there and hedging ball screens for most of the season, and Kansas is a top four defense.
I know.
That says a lot about how good some people are on the defensive side of the ball, besides Hunter Dickinson. But yeah, I think Kansas kind of unlocked a little bit of their identity here because of Shakeel Moore, because of just everybody kind of buying in. So, yeah, I really liked Zeke Mayo's comments after the game. He said the team is egoless, and we have arguably 8, 9 starters on this team. Everybody's got to get their minutes, and coach preaches that we buy into the system. So,
And I think the ego list is what makes the defense go. Because individually, I mean, Hunter's not a good defender. Zeke Mayo is not a good individual on ball defender, but he is smart and he's bought in. So he's going to play help and he's going to jump passing lanes. And, KJ's great. Dewan's great. Rylan, as I've talked about, not known for his defense, but is getting after it. Shaquille Moore is known for his defense. I mean, this is just a complete 180 of what we thought was going to happen before the season. And when I say we, I'm not just talking about you and me, Sam.
yeah.
Like this, the general opinion of Kansas was this team's going to score. They're going to score a lot. They might struggle defensively. Well, now this identity is kind of like, let's lock down. You give up less than 30 points each half, you're going to win every single game. That's not going to happen every game. But if you have that mindset, Kansas State actually going to score 60 points, is what I'm saying. You hold a team to 65, under 70, you're going to be fine. You're going to be just fine. You gave up 13 points in one half. Clearly, it's possible. Clearly, you can do it. Arizona State wasn't even like chucking bad shots and throwing up bricks. Like their first half, they were pretty efficient offensively. Kansas just decided to lock in. So,
And that full court press, and Bill Self, hats off to him because Arizona State only had 7 guys in this game, and they
mhm,
were
run
tired,
them down,
and
yeah.
Bill Self just wore them down
Run
in
down.
the second half. The two more quick things before we get out of here. I asked about Marco Jackson after the game. He was kind of, dribbling around, shooting around a little bit pregame. And this is what Self said. He said, quote, he's not practicing by any stretch, but he's doing individuals 1-on-0, so he's not going to be in contact till the season's over. But he's making good progress. He'll be 100% unless he has a setback by March or so. So hopefully in March or so he can return to practice at 100%. And then before we get into the Cincinnati preview, Wes Miller had some kind words to say about Kansas. I'm going to play those right now.
What's the challenge of Kansas?
Oh boy, they're the oldest team in the country, the most experienced team in the country. Um, it's one of those things that they're a national championship contender. Okay, and when you say that about a team, if that's what you say about a team, they're a national championship contender, and there's only a handful that probably people feel that way about. They present a load of challenges. The first thing is the depth and the experience, and the level of their players. I mean, you're talking about guys on their roster that were the leading scorers at other high major schools, other NCAA tournament teams a year ago. Okay, like they have a transfer that was the leading scorer on an NCAA tournament team that's playing limited minutes, right, in recent games. I mean, they are as deep as I've seen a college basketball team in recent memory in the portal era. I mean, it's truly remarkable at every single position. And again, other than Flory Badunga, they're all really old and really experienced, and not just experienced, and they've played a lot of college basketball. They've played a lot of high-level college basketball and had a lot of success in college basketball. That then you know, obviously the coaching is at the highest level, and they play a style of play that puts a lot of pressure on you in transition. They put pressure on you at the rim. They have terrific rim presence defensively, and you know they don't make it easy to score early in possessions. I mean, they are for a reason they're considered one of the best teams in college basketball going into the year. They're still considered that now, so they present a world of challenges.
So there you have it. Some high praise from Wes Miller. And when we come back, we will be previewing Cincinnati with the beat writer, Neil Meyer. Stay tuned with us, y'all.
There is no sport in America that is more difficult to follow than college basketball. It can be overwhelming. That's where the Field of 68 Daily comes into play. The Daily is your go-to source for injury updates, recruiting news, and transfer portal additions that actually matter. For just $50 a year, get access to the same information that your favorite team's coaching staff is subscribed for. Quality content can be hard to find in the college basketball space. The Daily is here to help you with that.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Hum, a Kansas Hoops podcast via the Field of 68. Jackson had to go coach, so I am here by myself with Neil Meyer. Neil, one of my good buds I've gotten to know over the past couple years since Cincy has moved into the Big 12. We've seen each other at a few Big 12 events. He is the Cincinnati beat writer for Front Office News via Rivals. He's also the co-host of the Bearcat Blitz podcast. Neil, just how are we doing today, and are you staying warm up there in Cincinnati? I know you guys got hit by the snow as well.
Yeah, man, staying warm, obviously. I know we talked before the show, 9 degrees this morning, and we're about up to 30, so a little warmer this afternoon, so I'll take that 30 degrees compared to what it was this morning, but I'm kind of nervous for the snowstorm coming. Obviously, I know we had a big snowstorm earlier this week, and some of the streets still aren't that really cleared, to say the least, so I'm kind of worried for another round, but it's going to be an exciting, hopefully it's not as the 2 to 4 inches of snow they're expecting on game day Saturday, so I'm kind of hoping we don't get that. But overall, yeah, staying warm, and I'm really excited to be on here talking UC Kansas with you, Sam.
Well, that's good to hear, Neil. Let's just go ahead and hop right into it. Cincinnati, before the holiday break, top 20 team sitting at 10-1, and now the Bearcats have lost 3 straight to open Big 12 play. They lost to Kansas State on the road, lost to Arizona at home, and then most recently they lost to Baylor by 20 on the road this past Tuesday. What is going wrong for Cincinnati lately, and how do they kind of get back on track against Kansas?
Yeah, I think it's a number of things for Cincinnati right now, but the biggest thing to take away is kind of the confidence there. Obviously, you lose a tough one there on the road to Kansas State, and that was a Kansas State team who Sam struggled immensely during non-conference slate, was 6-5 entering that matchup. Weren't really getting the production from Coleman Hawkins on the offensive side of the ball heading into that one. Then he explodes for a 20-10 double-double versus Cincinnati, and I think that was the difference maker in that one. But you look down at it, kind of trickled from the non-conference slate. I mean, you had the one loss at Villanova, and then you beat teams like Xavier, you beat Dayton, you beat the Northern Kentucky, you sweep the state of Ohio. But outside of that, Xavier's kind of underperformed. Dayton has underperformed as of late, so it was kind of those key quad one matchups that looked good might not actually look good as of to date, depending on what those other teams have done in recent weeks. But I think it was just a lack of confidence, especially heading into Big 12 play. You kind of knew what you were going to expect. First road environment, and Villanova was their essential first road game. You had the win versus Georgia Tech, but there wasn't many Georgia Tech fans in the building. So Kansas State was essentially the first or second real road environment for Cincinnati. And Kansas State, everybody knows, is an easy place to really go in and win a ball game at, especially when you're new to a conference. So overall, that was their first time playing at Kansas State. So definitely it was a close game, but I think it's confidence right now. I mean, you look down and I say that in example, Sam, because I know we're going to talk about it. Free throw shooting is a big issue for Cincinnati right now. That's going to be the number one thing that people talk about. I mean, you look down, you're 12 of 23 versus Arizona, and you lose a game by 4. Same thing, you shoot 60% from the line versus Kansas State, and you lose a game by 3. Those are going to be your two things, and then turnovers, taking care of the ball. I think when you do those two things, Cincinnati's capable of winning games, making some noise in the Big 12. But right now, it's just a confidence thing. I mean, obviously, the big Baylor game on Tuesday night was you didn't know what to expect. I mean, Baylor was coming off getting beat by 20. Cincinnati trailed by as much as 20 versus Arizona, comes back and loses by 5. So two different completely lopsided games, but Baylor get blown out by Iowa State without two key players in this one as Celestine and Langston Love weren't able to play for Baylor, but everything that could have went wrong for Cincinnati went wrong on Tuesday night down in Waco to say the least. But I think it's just a confidence issue like we talked about. But it's going to be curious to see how they wrap things up. We talked to Wes Miller today, and kind of seems like instead of taking that approach where he's sitting there lighting a fire, taking his shots at players one on one, he's just like, okay, we're back to work. That's the kind of mentality you want to have in this conference, especially.
Yeah, hey, Kansas is right there with you guys with the free throws. Kansas' problem isn't missing them; it's just getting to the line. But we're right there with you with the free throw shooting there. The thing that stands out to me about Cincinnati, just looking at the metrics, is their defense, and they're number 11 in Ken Palm's defensive efficiency metric right now. Tell me why they're so solid on that end of the floor.
Yeah, I really think it all starts right there in the front court, Sam, with Aziz Bandago. I think he's playing the best basketball of his career right now. I mean, you saw flashes of it before the back injury last year, and then you saw flashes when he got fully healthy towards the end of the season. But what he does right now for Cincinnati is he's playing at an elite level, the best basketball of his career. And on top of that, you pair that alongside a guy like Dylan Mitchell, Dan Skillings. They have the size and the length to disrupt teams going to the hole. And I think that's the biggest thing because I know when we covered this team in the summer and we were getting the good looks at it in the offseason, when the TBT was going on around, the alumni was scrimmaging them and they're like, we haven't seen a Cincinnati team with this much size and depth. They're on the wings in the front court that it's going to be hard to get to the rim. I think that's what really stands out to them. But their metrics on the defensive end is their pride and joy is rebounding the basketball. I think that's the biggest thing. And when you have guys who are freak athletes like Dylan Mitchell, Aziz Bandago, Dan Skillings, now that he's back fully healthy, I think seeing those three guys take a massive jump into the game and really affect the game on the defensive side is what will propel Cincinnati to success here.
Particularly with this game, how do you think Cincinnati can kind of limit Kansas offensively? We've seen some teams, particularly West Virginia, they kind of parked the guy who's guarding KJ Adams in the lane, and they also had whoever was guarding DeJuan Harris kind of sag off and help on Hunter Dickinson in the post. Do you think Wes Miller will kind of follow this blueprint? And since he is also top 15 in defensive three-point attempts to field goal attempts, so they do a good job of running you off the line as well. What do you just think of maybe the strategy going in against Kansas?
Yeah, I think that could be a great impact in this one because if you look down last season about what happened in the matchup versus these two teams at Allen Fieldhouse last year, Cincinnati had no answer for Kevin McCullough in that game. So that was the difference maker there. And I think they're going to see kind of what KJ Adams does so well, and that's beat you guys inside. I think when he can get to his spots right around that 8 to 12 foot range, he's very good at what he does in the lane in the paint. So it's going to be interesting to see the Cincinnati kind of sag off DeJuan Harris with a guy like Jizzle James or Simas Lukosius, whoever that might be, and to kind of help alongside Hunter Dickinson because everybody knows Hunter Dickinson is arguably one of the best players in the Big 12 conference, maybe if not the best player in the Big 12 conference. So when you're 7'2", you're an All-American and for multiple different years now, it's going to be hard to defend. I'm excited for that matchup with Aziz Bandago and Hunter, but Cincinnati will definitely probably bring some help between guys like Dylan Mitchell and Simas Lukosius there in the paint alongside Dan Skillings to kind of limit Hunter Dickinson from getting going.
Let's kind of get into this roster a little bit. First, I wanted to ask, how are you guys doing health-wise? Are there any key injuries that we should know about, either from the beginning of the season to now? Or how are you guys just doing in the health department?
Yeah, I think the health department is the only thing that's really kind of surfacing right now is a minor rolled ankle for Connor Hickman that he it was a nagging foot injury that he dealt with heading into Arizona. And then Arizona, he kind of tweaked it. Didn't come back to the game, but he did play versus Baylor the other night. So I think that's kind of the only injury front. I mean, you had the news of Dan Skillings having a slight meniscus injury at the beginning of the year, and then undergoes that minor procedure, and he got back quicker than a lot of people anticipated. They weren't really the first game they were anticipating him back from the first injury. Sam was they didn't know it could have been Kansas State was the original timeline for him to be back, but then he comes back at the beginning of December. They're right. Villanova, I believe, was the first game back, so that's a huge step there because the health of Dan Skillings when he was out compared to where now fully healthy, two different Cincinnati ball clubs. And I think everybody saw that during the beginning of non-conference play. Dan Skillings has changed the completely impact of this team, and this is a team now with Dan Skillings healthy that Cincinnati is getting the hype that they had in the offseason heading into this season because they're fully healthy. The record might not show it, but the potential is there. It's just starting to click.
Let's get into this guard group now. Seems to be kind of one of the strengths of the Cincinnati team. We talked about Skillings. Simas, is that what it is? It's Simas?
CMOS.
Simas, gotcha. And then Jizzle James. Obviously, they're the top three scorers on this team. Just talk about those three and what they kind of need to bring against Kansas.
Yeah, followed what Cincinnati has done. Jizzle James and CMOS Lukosius have kind of struggled in the offensive side of things during conference play. I mean, those are your two guys that you look to for volume scoring. And Jizzle James just went 2 for 11 versus Baylor. He had another rough night versus Arizona and Kansas State. So he's starting to find his groove. He's in one of those like sophomore slumps, to say the least. It's not like he's trying to force things. He's getting great looks, and anybody who's kind of watched Jizzle James's game develop, he can get to just about any spot on the court and get his shot off and create for him, but the shots just aren't falling. And that's the thing. Like, they're high efficient shots. I know a lot of the Cincinnati fans or whatnot, they're always like, ask Coach West why Jizzle James isn't shooting better. It's like they're high quality looks, they're just not going in. And unfortunately, you have to go through a slump to get out of it. Essentially, as a player, you want to go through those slumps to overcome it, and then things start to take off in the right direction. And then CMOS Lukosius was on an absolute heater to start the season. I think he was shooting nearly 60% from behind the arc. But teams are starting to figure it out. They're starting to figure out that he's the shooter of the team. Everyone's really defending it well. But for Cincinnati to be successful, Sam, to get CMOS Lukosius going, they got to find their actions. They got to screen to get him open. But Big 12 teams are doing a good job at defending and taking CMOS Lukosius out of the picture, especially what he was able to do last season and this year so far. Teams know he's going to beat you off the three-point line. They know that's his shot. So for Cincinnati, they got to get some kind of offense going between Jizzle James and the likes of Dan Skillings, Dylan Mitchell, and some of the other counterparts there to really kind of open CMOS up. Because once CMOS gets one or two shots to fall, everything else will come for him, and that's the confidence you need. But we thought we were going to see it versus Arizona. The first shot goes in, and then nothing else from behind the arc after that one. Goes 1 for 7. So it's just a confidence thing. I really feel like that's the big thing. But once those two guys get to scoring in Jizzle James and CMOS Lukosius, it's going to be a great sight to see for Cincinnati. And when we're talking the guard play, Day Thomas is a guy who really has kind of come off the bench and looked like himself prior to the injury last year. I think people aren't giving him the credit that he really deserves in an aspect. Everybody's always talking about Jizzle James, but Day Thomas brings a whole different intensity on the defensive side of the ball that not many people kind of realize. And we saw that firsthand Saturday versus Arizona when him and Dan Skillings held Caleb Love to 3 of 15 from the field. So that's another positive takeaway, too.
Kansas fans sure remember CMOS going off in the Big 12 tournament, so I'm sure that Kansas will try to limit him. You guys have a pretty solid front court as well. Obviously, Dylan Mitchell, the Texas transfer, and then Aziz that we kind of already talked about. What problems do they pose, and what do you think of the matchup just with Hunter, KJ, and then Flory, the freshman big coming off the bench?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting too to see how does Cincinnati Dylan. I would assume that Dylan Mitchell will probably be guarding KJ in this matchup. So it's going to be a fun matchup to see. You have two elite players going at it once in there in the front court. So anytime you have that, I mean, but realistically speaking, that's the Big 12 each and every night. You're going to have two high caliber elite players battling it in and out every night. So that's going to be a matchup to really kind of keep an eye on and circle because KJ Adams had a successful go around versus Cincinnati last year in the Big 12 tournament, but it's going to be interesting. Dillon Mitchell is arguably one of the best defenders in all of college basketball in every metric you look at. He does a lot of things well. He can guard 1 through 5. So it's kind of interesting to see, is he going to shift off or make those switches and kind of take the switches when he needs to. But that's going to be a matchup to watch. He's just so athletic. For a guy his size, he has tremendous bounce, tremendous athleticism, and he can really push the ball. He can really get up and down the court. High motor guy. I mean, Sam, I think it was the Xavier game, crosstown shootout. He actually got hurt about the 8-minute mark, and not many people kind of gave him the credit that he needed to. But a rolled ankle that probably would have taken everybody out of the game. Dillon Mitchell just tied his shoes up, comes back, and wills the Bearcats to a victory. That's the kind of player you need. And I think he could be a game changer here. But Aziz Bandaogo versus Hunter Dickinson kind of scares me. Because if Cincinnati gets into any early foul trouble in this one, which Hunter Dickinson is very good at getting opposing teams into foul trouble. If Dickinson is able to get Aziz into early foul trouble, it's going to be interesting to see how does Arrington Page step in and kind of take that challenge of a guy like Hunter Dickinson off the bench. I mean, AP's minutes have gone up and he has seen growth throughout the start of the season, but there's still a lot of raw potential there for him in the depth behind Aziz Bandaogo. But it's going to be interesting. That front court's going to have their hands full. Flory Badunga is a very athletic. He's a freak. Cincinnati recruited him very hard in the recruiting process. And then Hunter Dickinson and KJ, those are guys who are very experienced guys who know what it takes to win, knows what it takes to win on the road in a tough environment. Those guys have done it for so long and have been very efficient in their college careers. So it's going to be a handful on Saturday. But I like the matchup between Dillon and Aziz there in the front court. It might be arguably one of the best matchups we see in college basketball this weekend there in the front court. It's going to be a fun time, though, to say the least.
Yeah, it's actually kind of crazy how similar KJ Adams and Dillon Mitchell are in terms of their style of play. Is there anybody else, Neil, that we haven't mentioned that you think we should in terms of this game against Kansas?
You know, I'm really curious myself because I feel like this could be a game with how rotations really haven't found their stride over recent weeks. Now, it's going to be interesting to see, like, does Wes Miller kind of give guys like CJ Frederick extra minutes this week with Connor Hickman struggling? Cincinnati's bench has really struggled to start Big 12 play. I mean, Tyler Betsy has really struggled to kind of find his shot in recent weeks. Connor Hickman, same as well. AP. Cincinnati's bench has really struggled there. So it could be a game where we see opportunities come for a guy like Rayvon Griffith or CJ Frederick. Everybody knows CJ Frederick was one of the best shooters in all of college basketball, and maybe still is during his time at Iowa and Kentucky. Could this be a game where he come in and knock down a couple shots in a couple minutes, even though he hasn't played much this season? It's going to be interesting, but we saw time versus Baylor for the first time in nearly a month for CJ Frederick, so could be something to keep an eye out on at Fifth Third Arena on Saturday. But there's a lot of different ways this game could go, and it just makes your mind think, Sam, about how talented both of these teams are. You never know who could really pop off in a sense.
Yeah, I think for Kansas, this is a big barometer, a game for Kansas after blowing out Arizona State and UCF. This kind of really, road environment, see where Kansas is at. Before we let you go, Neil, give us a couple keys to the game and then a score prediction. I'm going to go with 69-60. Kansas gets the win. I believe KenPom has us at a 69-67 win for Kansas.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. This is going to be a game where it could go many different ways. I'm going to say 67-60 in favor of Kansas, so pretty close there. But the reason I say that is Cincinnati has struggled to find their offensive groove here in Big 12 play. They have not scored over 70 points since the Dayton game nearly a month ago, so offense has to be clicking. But what Kansas does on the defensive end, they are playing some of the best ball right now. This Kansas team is going to present problems because it's talked about obviously well enough in the media, Sam. This Kansas team is probably the deepest Kansas team that you guys have had in recent years, but maybe one of the deepest teams in college basketball. And experience is something that Cincinnati has within their group. But when you have a team whose average time in college is 4.5 years or 4 years roughly, in a new era in NIL, transfer portal, all that. It's kind of unique. So overall, I'm going 67-60 here in favor of Kansas, but it's going to be a tough environment. But keys to the game for Kansas on this side, don't turn the ball over. Cincinnati's going to do the same. If Kansas wants to win this game, you got to find ways to take Cincinnati out of the offensive boards. Vice versa for Cincinnati, you got to win the offensive boards for them. And then on top of it, just those two games, Cincinnati, you got to make your free throws. Can't have another 50% free throw shooting night, especially in your own gym, and you just can't. Cincinnati has gotten off to a very slow start in every Big 12 game.
Okay,
You can't
Kansas
have
is
that
right
versus
there with
Kansas.
you. Kansas
You
is
can't
right
have
there.
that versus Kansas, especially because I believe, Sam, right? This is the first time Kansas has came to Fifth Third Arena.
I'm not exactly sure on that, but perhaps. I
I
honestly
believe I believe it's one of the first times that Kansas has came to Fifth Third Arena. So overall, you never know what could happen when these matchups present itself. But a big key to this game, Sam, is going to be the crowd. Everybody we have heard all season, if the crowd is into it for Cincinnati, Fifth Third is one of the hardest places to play at in all of college basketball. Now, with the weather predicament situation, it could be interesting, but keys for Cincinnati, you got to win the offensive boards. That's something they do so well, and that's pride and joy, offensive rebounding, rebounding the basketball, turnovers, and free throws. If you do those three things, this game could be a lot closer than a lot of people anticipate.
Well, all right, Neil. Thank you very much for joining us here on the Kansas Hoops podcast. That is all we have for you guys today. We will be back on Monday with John Fanta joining the show here on the So we're very excited for that. And before I send you guys out of here, I just want to say thank you for everybody who's been tuning in. I just got a message from one of the Field of 68 producers today. Our YouTube views are up 500% from last season, and it's all because of you guys who are tuning in and watching us. So